Hello and welcome to the Ant-Man channel. It is Friday, the 30th of May 2014, and I'm your host, Ant-Man. Oh yeah, I don't know why, out of all the days of the week, today is just that happens to be that day where I see so much stuff that is interesting and I want to talk about. So I'll just get on with it. So let's do that, shall we? WND.com is where I'm at, and this is a article by Bob Unruh, Gay National Monuments to Rewrite America's History, activists paying for study to select locations important to homosexual agenda. Wow. So they got a picture of the Liberty Bell. The Liberty Bell, Jefferson's Monticello, and George Washington's Mount Vernon. Mount Rushmore, the Supreme Court building, and the White House, Delaware's old courthouse, the Daniel Webster Law Office in Massachusetts. I don't know what all that's about, but they're all protected by the federal government to preserve the nation's heritage. It's funny because they condemn the founding fathers nowadays. Like, imagine if Thomas Jefferson was around today. What would they say about someone like Thomas Jefferson in our day? He'd probably be called a terrorist. You know what I mean? He'd probably be called a traitor or something. And to think of that, when you look at our president, you see the guy that's sitting in the Oval Office today. You're like, man, it's a shameful thing, man. It's hard to look at, to be honest with you. And soon, the list could include a camera shop in San Francisco, formerly owned by Harvey Milk, the homosexual city official who, according to a biography, pursued young boys most of his life and supported the leader of the Jonestown suicide cult. Oh! Oh! That's a good role model for your kids. Pursued young boys. When I read that right now, I was thinking like some like creepy little hobbling like troll or like demon. You know what I mean? Like, that's ugly. It's so ugly. The federal government has announced plans to set up an 18-member team within the National Park Service to consider sites of significance to the history of lesbian, gay, transgender, and bisexual Americans. Something that popped up because I'm like on my camera or on my iPhone, excuse me. I have, what do you call it? I have like these apps for like all the different, prostitute medias like AP and Politico and the Washington Post and et cetera, et cetera. I have them all. And one of them today said something about the healthcare is going to cover people who want to have like operations so that they can go from being a woman to a man or a man to a woman. And it's like, my eyes went crossed right now because I was just thinking about how really, really disturbing that is. What the heck is going on in this country? It seems like the pedal has gone down to the metal these days. Like, they're just going for broke. They're trying to change this country. And I don't even want to say try. They have changed this country. And I'm going to stand firm. And I'm not going to change for nobody. I don't care if you got I don't care what you're going to threaten me with. I'm not going to change. It's my life. I'm going to choose to live my life the way that I want to without having to be peer pressured into becoming some type of immoral, hobbling retard. You know what I mean? That goes around chasing little boys. That's disgusting, dude. To me, that's gross. And to impose that on me is disturbing and it's offensive. But Interior Secretary Sally Jewell's appointees will identify relevant sites to be considered for inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places as a National Historic Landmark or as a National Monument. Park Service Director Jonathan Jarvis said the Park Service is, in my view, America's storyteller through place. It's important that the places we recognize represent the full complement of the American experience. Among the locations that could be considered is Milk's former camera shop in San Francisco, where he became a controversial character on several fronts. WND reported when, after state officials in California designated a Harvey Milk Day in public schools, family groups organized to encourage parents to send their children to private schools or homeschools instead. That would be a good idea. Get your kids out of public school. Mayday! Mayday! man, I don't think anyone's listening anyway. But get your kids out of school, man. They're gonna be indoctrinated unless they're very strong in the Lord. They won't change. They'll go through tough times in high school and college, but they're not gonna change if you train them well. If you raise them in the admonishment of the Lord, right? Bring them up knowing God, knowing what He did for Israel, knowing what He did for the Hebrews, knowing what He did for us. Jesus, that is, what He did for us. Lawmakers who adopted the special recognition for milk didn't make a point of highlighting milk's ties to cult leader Jim Jones. And, I love the left, don't you? Milk spoke at several political rallies at Jones People's Temple and said Jones was known as a man of the highest character who has undertaken constructive remedies for social problems, which have been amazing in their scope and effectiveness. No amount of counseling is going to help you, my friend. It's all quack science, dude, like that psychiatry nonsense. I'll just tell you straight up. I was a troublemaker when I was a little kid, so the judge gave me things to do. Like community service, which was working at a thrift shop. I had to take counseling. My childhood was very messed up, but thank God He saved me, right? If He could save me, He could save you, man. When people in the church hear my testimony, sometimes they get like they look at me like this, like, because a lot of Christians they try to like hide their past. No, don't try to hide your past, dude. Tell everybody about what God has saved you from. It's called a testimony for a reason. Your testimony is a powerful thing, man. It's probably one of the most powerful things you possess. So you should use it, because I've been to psychiatrists. I've seen these quacks before. They just look at their time. They just look at their clock the whole time. They're not really concerned about you at all. They try to get down to like certain things. They try to psychoanalyze where the problems come from, where the disturbance is coming from. But this isn't going to help you ultimately. This is just, you're being exposed. You're being exploited by like these kind of people. You know, like, I don't believe that this kind of stuff helps you. People who, you know, go to these psychiatrist places where they get therapy or whatever you want to call it, and they sit on that chair and they're just laying there and talking to the guy. If you talk to them, they'll tell you that the thing that they have to deal with the most is guilt. People go to those places because they are struggling with hardcore guilt that doesn't allow them to sleep at night, that doesn't allow them to think clearly. What is one of the main things that Jesus Christ lifts off your shoulders? Guilt. He takes away guilt, along with shame, condemnation, and just all the bad things that come along with failure, falling short, sinning, hurting people. An increasingly despotic secularist movement. Federal officials said the study of possible sites is being funded by Denver homosexual activist Tim Gill, whose millions come from the Quark software empire. Sorry. This is like the universal sign for homosexuals now for me. Like hobbling, chasing after little kids type of thing. God, I'm so mean, sorry. But the kind of things you guys do, man, is despicable, man. I mean, get over it, man. Like, really, you cannot hide behind these disgusting acts and say that you're loving and that you want freedom and all these things. No, you don't. You guys are like a mafia of people who want to change our country for the worst, man, in my honest opinion. I could go on, but you'll never understand it because you don't want to know anyway. Quark software empire. I was getting so caught up in saying quack that I said quack software empire. Quark software empire. Those millions come from there. Gill has declared LGBT history in American history. Wow. While we take this important step to recognize the courageous contributions of LGBT Americans, we need to unite to ensure we leave none of our fellow Americans behind, he said. Unbelievable. Let's see how much time I have left. I waste so much of your time. I'm sorry. You could go ahead. I'll just read it. I'll read it fast. The announcement immediately drew a warning from Ed Vitagigliano of the American Family Association, an advocate for millions of American families. The homosexual movement and its activists have been quite successful in pushing this ideology and now framing the debate, he said. He said the sexual revolution arose from increasing secularization. which has turned the U.S. into a nation our founders would not recognize. In fact, they'd be horrified if they saw us today. The country is no longer being run by we the people. The country is being run by activist federal judges with corporate interests. You know, like people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and stuff like that? You know all the stuff that's going on with Donald Sterling right now? This kind of stuff comes from people like Jesse Jackson, for example. They're out there to kind of look for ways to get these. Those guys are some of the most corrupt people in our country, you guys, because these people are people like, you probably didn't know Lil Wayne has a degree in psychology. You probably don't really even think about how NBA players have these types of degrees too. A lot of these kinds of people like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton are very smart when it comes to manipulating people. And they use these type of things like the Donald Sterling scandal to point their agenda in a certain, to try to point these issues at a certain thing that they want to get through. Like they want to get their agenda through. And they have a vision for this country. And it's not a good one. The country is no longer being run by we the people. I already said that, and there is no really... Okay. It's being run by a fairly lawless executive branch, he said, and there is really no real counterweight to that movement except for the church. And far too often the church remains quiet on this issue. I think that the whole Michelle Obama telling your kids what to eat and stuff... There was like an article today by GMO News or something like that. Is that what it's called? I forgot. It's something like that. GMO News or something. These guys had published an article today on Facebook. They said something about some guy, he got put on probation because he made his son walk home or something, and the son had disobeyed with him, and he told the school or something, and so the dad got punished because the way that he was disciplining his kid was too old-fashioned, is what the judge said. Whoa. Your kids don't belong to you no more, dude. Michelle Obama is telling your kids what to eat. I mean, they're trying to destroy the family, the church, everything that has to do with the community and grassroots movements happening. Because if we come together, they're dead. And I mean that metaphorically. I don't mean like physically. Because I'd rather see them in jail, rotting in jail, than actually hanging them high. Because we don't really... I don't know. That's just me, though. The people will not be allowed to decide what is and what is not right. They will not be allowed to decide what types of national sites will be honored, so the American people will become the subjects of an increasingly despotic secularist movement, he said. But Vita Giuliano said there is hope. The only hope our nation has to return to its origins, and in our opinion to return to what made this country strong, is a spiritual awakening. A revival that is unprecedented in human history since the first century. That's the only way to change this nation, he said. We need like a new Reformation. We need a new Martin Luther, you guys. And don't look at me. Whatever political and cultural changes follow, the prerequisite is that awakening. There's much better people like John MacArthur, for example, that could do a way better job than I can at starting some type of revolution here. John Whitfield, excuse me if that's not his name, but that guy got everybody ready and before 1776, before they fought the revolution. He was open air preaching to everybody in America at that time, and everybody was like, yeah, at what he was saying. And they got spiritually strengthened to take on the British when they try to invade us. Nothing happens by coincidence, you guys. If Enoch and Elijah come back and they start talking to you, then you better know that they're trying to get you ready for something. Because that's kind of like in the Bible, by the way. Let's see, the only hope our nation has... That's the only way to change this nation, he said. Whatever political and cultural changes follow, the prerequisite is that awakening. In January, the Bay Area Reporter and LGBT publication reported the lack of an LGBT historic sites was garnering the attention of National Park Service officials. The report said staff from the National Register of Historic Places and the National Historic Landmarks program hosted a webinar in October to discuss how LGBT community leaders can work with the National Park Service to locate, document, and protect sites associated with LGBT history. The online meeting was described as a coming out of sorts for the National Park Service LGBTQ initiative, coming out of sorts. The Stonewall Inn, where homosexuals rioted against law-affirming morality, already has such a designation, as do a couple of other Eastern Seaboard sites. I mean, they show who they really are when you see that they have these rallies and you'll see a Christian out there with like a sign, and they start beating him up. Oh, they're so loving and they're so tolerant, right? Yeah. Pretty soon, what you saw in the book of Judges and what you saw in the book of Genesis, when the people came, that's going to start happening, I think. That people are just going to start knocking on your door, and they're going to be like, hey, that guest that came into your house, bring him out so that we can have sex with him. And you're not going to be able to defend yourself from that. There's going to be mobs of hobbling homosexuals coming to your house, telling you to bring out your guests so that they may have sex with them. Isn't that what happened in Sodom? Isn't that what happened in the times of the Judges? When that Levite guy was walking around and he happened to go to a place where... was it Gilead? If I'm wrong, then someone forgive me. But anyways, God bless you and have a good day.